Big news out of the state of Wisconsin, where a new lawsuit has been filed challenging that state's congressional districts as an impermissible gerrymander under the state constitution. Welcome back to Democracy Docket. I'm Marc Elias.
And I'm Paige Moskowitz. Let's get started.
All right, Paige. Big redistricting news out of the state of Wisconsin, where a new petition has been filed in the state Supreme Court. In full disclosure, my law firm filed this petition, and it is an effort to strike down and replace the congressional map that is in place in that state, because it is a impermissible partisan gerrymander in violation of the state constitution. Paige, I'm sure we'll unpack all of that, but this is potentially a very big deal for residents and citizens of Wisconsin, but also for the broader political world as we watch the congressional map teeter between Democrats and Republicans.
Right, Marc, as everyone knows, Wisconsin is a swing state. It has really close competitive elections. It has both Democratic and Republican statewide officials. However, its congressional delegation is made up of 8 seats, 6 of which are filled by Republicans, 2 by Democrats. And Wisconsin is kind of in an interesting situation right now with its congressional map. The map it has right now is actually based on its 2011 map, which was blatantly gerrymandered to favor Republicans. And then when it came time to the 2020 census, there was a lot of back and forth between lawmakers. Governor Tony Evers vetoed the map, and eventually the then conservative majority of the Wisconsin Supreme Court ordered what was called a Lease Change Map, essentially taking the 2011 map, making a few tweaks to it, and putting it into effect, and continuing to perpetuate a Republican gerrymander in the state.
Yeah, and this is really important to keep in mind, that it was a conservative state Supreme Court in Wisconsin that raised a lot of eyebrows when it said that it was going to draw a map, because there was this deadlock, as you say, between the governor and the state legislature, that it was going to adopt a map, because it was ultimately the arbiter of the final map. It was going to adopt a map that, under a principle called least change, which is we're gonna start with the map that existed after the 2010 census, and then we're going to tweak it the minimum amount necessary in order to meet population equality and the like, federal constitutional requirements. But we're going to make minimal changes. The problem with least change is that it means the court, in this case the conservative dominated state Supreme Court, is essentially buying in and validating what was a partisan gerrymander, because everyone agreed the 2011 map was a Republican partisan gerrymander. So for the state Supreme Court to say, well, we're just going to adopt a least change map, what it was basically doing is putting a judicial imprimatur on what was a previous partisan gerrymander. And this, like I said, this raised a lot of eyebrows across the country when the Supreme Court did this, after it stopped being a majority conservative court and became a more balanced court. It actually, in a case involving the state legislature, sort of repudiated this least change map approach. It basically rejected that. So this new petition in state Supreme Court over the congressional maps basically says, just you should reject that here as well, and there should be a new map. So that's kind of the legal back and forth on this. But I want to say one other word though about sort of where you began, which is that Wisconsin is a swing state. I would argue it is actually a lean Democratic swing state. Now, look, there are lean Democratic swing states, there are lean Republican swing states. We can get into a lot of nuance between them. But, the governor of Wisconsin is a Democrat. Tammy Baldwin just won re-election for Senate as a Democrat. The Attorney General is a Democrat. Yes, Donald Trump carried it, but very narrowly. But I also, Paige, want to throw into this mix of elections the recent Supreme Court election. Right, we just saw a Supreme Court election, which was not a partisan election, but it was it was essentially a proxy battle between the two parties. You had Elon Musk and Donald Trump, and the Republicans endorsed one candidate, and you had, most of the Democrats in the state and a lot of progressive national organizations endorsing the liberal candidate in the race. And Paige, that was not a particularly close outcome. That was, as I recall, 10 points. I think we did a video with Ben Wickler, the Democratic Party chair, afterwards. And I encourage everyone, by the way, to go look at that video, because we talked a lot about this partisan, whether it's swing state, what the partisan breakdown of it all is in the wake of that state Supreme Court election. Also, this is the perfect opportunity to make sure you are subscribed to Democracy Docket's YouTube channel. It is free. You just click the button that says subscribe. That is right in front of you. It's right in front of you on your computer. And you'll make sure you'll get all the videos that Paige and I put out. And if you click the little bell, you'll get alerted whenever there's new content. So go ahead and do that right now. But, that's kind of the political background of the state.
Right. And in 2021, like we said, there was a conservative majority on the state Supreme Court. There's now a liberal majority on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Janet Protasewicz flipped the court in 2023. Susan Crawford was elected to maintain the liberal majority, as you said, just a couple of weeks ago. A very similar petition asking the state Supreme Court to order a new congressional map was filed last year, and it didn't pan out. So what's different now?
Yeah, so it's a fair question, but I want to say this. I always warn people, whether it's the U.S. Supreme Court or state Supreme Courts, it is correct to read their decisions as their decisions. If they issue a decision in a case, they take it, they have an oral argument, they issue an opinion. Obviously that's binding, and you should take it both literally and seriously. What happened with the last cases, as I recall, is the court actually denied the petition. In other words, it didn't take the case effectively. It said, we're not going to take it and decide this question. And I always tell people, don't overread those things, because you never exactly know why, in a particular case, justices on a high court that has discretion about cases, right? It's not like a federal district court where the case file appears on their desk and they have to, or on the bench, then they have to decide it. When you get to these higher courts where they have some discretion in the cases they hear or don't hear, you got to be a little careful about, what you read into one way or the other. I mean, look at another state, Paige, that you and I've talked a lot about, Pennsylvania. And there have been like a series of cases. I mean, I don't know how many videos you and I have done, probably more than on any other topic, about Pennsylvania courts and the issue of undated, misdated, wrongly dated, birth dated, every iteration of dates and signatures, missing signatures, whatever, right? Like all these things on these absentee ballots. And this has gone up and down to the state Supreme Court a number of times. And sometimes they take the cases, sometimes they don't take the cases. Sometimes they issue full rulings with full briefing. And so, I just think I think it's a bit of a fool's game to over predict what the state Supreme Court in Wisconsin will do. What's been filed now is just what I described, a petition asking the state Supreme Court to take this up. I mean, one of the things that's changed is the composition, right? There's not the partisan composition hasn't changed, but there is another person on the court in Justice Crawford, another justice off the court. So like sometimes, frankly, the interpersonal dynamics and how the court wants to proceed in the term will decide these things. I mean, you and I talked in a video, really recently about the Supreme Court, whether it would take a case in Alabama, redistricting case there, and I think I began that answer by talking about, what else the Supreme Court has to hear, and that's sometimes a practical consideration.
Marc, before we go, I want to touch on the claims that this petition is making. So, this lawsuit is saying that partisan gerrymandering violates the Wisconsin state constitution. It violates the state constitution provisions on equal protection, free speech, free government, association. We've seen those claims before, right? The state constitution affords voters some protections and privileges. Gerrymandering may violate that. What this lawsuit also says is that entirely independent of whether Wisconsin's Constitution prohibits partisan gerrymandering, Wisconsin's separation of powers principle prohibit the unusual judicial genesis of this heavily skewed congressional map. So this lawsuit isn't just about the partisan gerrymandering aspect, right? It's also about whether or not the court may have acted improperly when it approved this map. And that's kind of unusual, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the court acted improperly. I think the idea is that the court acted imprudently and in violation of the state constitution. So I don't think that there's like a suggestion that it was like wrongdoing on the part of the court or anything like that. I think that they got the law wrong. They got the state constitution. They didn't properly weigh and evaluate their role in a three branches of government system. And, that happens from time to time. That's what a lot of the briefing that gets done about things like, abstention doctrines and ripeness, right, is about these questions of the ballot, whether there is a proper separation of powers. And here I think, there is a real question, and I agree with the petitioners here. There is a real question about whether it is appropriate for a judicial body, for the state's highest court, to essentially bless what was, to begin with, a legislative political map. Okay, we can call it a partisan gerrymander, but essentially the 2011 map was the product of a Republican-dominated legislature that wanted to achieve a political outcome. And we talk a lot in the redistricting context about the fact that legislatures will want to achieve political outcomes. And that is not illegitimate under the jurisprudence set out by the US Supreme Court. And it's not even always partisan gerrymandering to do that. In the Louisiana case we talked about, part of the reason why Louisiana is defending drawing two majority Black districts was to say, we drew these two majority Black districts because we were trying to protect Speaker Mike Johnson, a white Republican, from potentially losing his seat. And that was a political outcome. So I think that what the separation of powers argument goes is that, by starting with this political map, which was a partisan gerrymander, the court essentially gave its imprimatur to that political process, and that is inappropriate for a judicial body. That the judicial body should have started with a neutral set of judicial principles, not with something that was really a partisan and a political map at its foundation. Look, there is a lot happening in the courts. You are getting a ton of new content from Democracy Docket on its website. You're getting updates in its newsletters. You're getting lots of premium content if you've subscribed to that. But you're also getting a lot of new video content. And it is something that Paige and I are really committed to. You are seeing more and more videos from us with guests, without guests, breaking news like this, that is really aimed at trying to give you multiple ways to stay informed about what's happening to democracy, what's happening in the courts. So please take a second and click the subscribe button to make sure that you are subscribed to this YouTube channel. It's free, and you'll get more content like this from us and from the other guests that we have on. And even better, click the bell to make sure that you are notified whenever there is new content. So that's my ask to you right now. If you enjoyed this video, please do that. Obviously, in addition to that, I'm always going to ask you to make sure you're subscribed to Democracy Docket's free daily and weekly newsletters, and to consider becoming a paid premium member. The links to all of that are in the show notes below. Thanks. We will see you next time.